Hello, everybody. Rev here. Going to continue the Matthew series, and what we have now is actually the beginning of Jesus' public ministry. What we've looked at before here, it was the temptation in the desert. We've looked at Jesus being baptized by John. We've seen kind of the origin of Jesus up to this point. And now we get to the part where Jesus actually begins his ministry. So I'm going to start reading, and this is in Matthew chapter 4, starting with verse 12. Now when Jesus heard that John the Baptist had been put in prison, he departed to Galilee. And leaving Nazareth, he came and dwelt in Capernaum, which is by the sea in the regions of Zebulun and Naphtali, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, by the way of the sea of the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light, and upon those who sat in the region and shadow of death, light has dawned. From that time Jesus began to preach and to say, Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. They immediately left their nets and followed him. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, in the boat with Zebedee their father, mending their nets. And he called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. And Jesus went about all of Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing all kinds of sickness, all kinds of disease among the people. Then his fame went throughout all of Syria, and they brought to him all sick people who were afflicted with various diseases and torments, and those who were demon-possessed, epileptics and paralytics, and he healed them. Great multitudes followed him from Galilee and from Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan. Now, this is the beginning of Jesus' public ministry. And a couple of things that we notice here is that when Jesus decides that it's time to start, after John had been arrested and Jesus begins to take the center stage in this narrative, Jesus does not go to Jerusalem, where you would expect the powerful Messiah to go. In fact, he retreats further into Galilee, to the land of Zebulun and Naphtali, which is called Galilee of the Gentiles. Now, this wasn't called Galilee of the Gentiles because this part was filled with more Gentiles, or because the people there were more suspect to Hellenization. Although those things are true, it was called Galilee of the Gentiles because from way back when, including the prophecy that Matthew quotes here, this had been an occupied territory. When Isaiah is talking about a light shining in this dark land, he's actually talking about Assyria coming and helping Judah against Israel and its allies. And what happens is Judah isn't faithful. They don't have faith. And in doing that, Assyria actually comes and takes part of the land of Judah, and it's under that oppression and under that rulership of a foreign country. That's what we're talking about, and that continues on. So now this occupied territory, it's occupied by Rome. It's Galilee that's owned by the Gentiles, and Jesus starts in this land that is oppressed. And what he says is, in the midst of that, he says, the empire of God. In the midst of the Roman Empire, in the place of the Roman Empire's power, he says, the empire of heaven is here. This is the message of Jesus. And I contend that it's the message of Jesus throughout the gospel. That Jesus' message isn't, hey, confess me, be a good boy, and when you die, you get to go to heaven. Jesus is talking about entering into a relationship with God where God's rulership becomes part of this very earth, and where the empire and rulership of God begins to take effect here and now. And that will continue into the afterlife, but here and now, the evidence of God's sovereignty on this earth rests within the people, and that we are to turn from our ideas of rulership, whether it's the idea that our nation or the idea of our religion or the idea of our economic structure, whatever, that these ideas of rulership are actually idols, and that in grabbing a hold of the empire of God and the rulership of God and walking in that, we actually begin to see heaven here. That will be continued in eternity. But for now, we begin to be a part of making that true here and now. Jesus invites us into a relationship with his Father that is not about the hereafter, but it's about right now in our present life and the way that we interact with the power systems all around us, whether they are nationalistic, whether they are religious, or whether they are economic. And so Jesus begins to talk about this stuff. And in the midst of this, people recognize that part of being set free is being set free from their illness, being set free from the demons that are possessing them. And they come to him, and he casts them out, and he sets them free. This is a view of Jesus the liberator. Now, one of the things that I think is really, it's really important, it's really fascinating, is that Jesus, when he's setting up the future of his movement, when he's, what I believe, setting up for the future of his church, he doesn't go to Jerusalem and find the priests. He doesn't go and find the most knowledgeable, the most educated, the most wise, or even, I would say, the most pure. What he actually does is he goes and finds people that were part of the despised working classes. In Cicero's list of the classes of people that are least respected, fishermen are all the way down at the bottom of the list, just above the tax collectors. So in the view of the people, the only people in the whole realm that are worse than fishermen, as far as being trashy people, would be the tax collectors, which of course I don't think that bit's changed very much. So Jesus, far from trying to bring around himself the best and the brightest, actually goes to the broken and the least of these, and he begins to build his community. It's interesting that the first thing Jesus does is not to begin his work by this teaching ministry, this miracle ministry, and all of this, but what he does is he gathers a people around him, and he begins to live the truth that he is going to teach everybody. For Jesus, the example is always more important than the words. That if Jesus is going to show us a way of life that actually connects us to the Father and each other, he's not going to do it just by his words, but he's going to do it by the actions in which he partakes. And so in starting his ministry, the first thing he does is he calls people to him. And what he says is, come and follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. He takes their own vocation and he says, leave your vocation, leave your job, leave your family, leave your house, leave all behind you. And I will redeem your vocation and make it something that begins to tap into the essence of what humanity can actually be. Jesus builds this community with the least of these, and he begins to grow what will become the church. Now, what does this mean for us? Well, to me, it's a really interesting situation, because we live in a world where there's so much pulling us. There's so much that's calling us this way and calling us that way. We have this idea that we're supposed to be good Americans, especially if we're Christians. We have this idea that we're supposed to, be good employees, that we're supposed to have this and have that. And half the time what we do is we spend our whole lives running around fulfilling allegiances that have absolutely nothing to do with our allegiance to the Creator. And in that, our allegiance to who we truly are inside, created in God's image. And Jesus calls these fishermen and he says, "Come and follow me." And right at that moment, they get faced with the decision. Do I continue to follow the dictates of my culture, my family, my nation, my religion? Do I continue to take part in the day-to-day activities, or do I leave it behind in order to follow this man and walk into a new empire, a new sovereignty that just may be the salvation of the entire world? And they do it. And the question that I guess I have to ask myself is, am I doing it a little bit? Or am I doing what they did and saying, I'm all in. I'm going to follow completely with everything in me. And in the end, I think that that's what God calls us to do. And so I have to ask myself, how am I doing that in my life? How am I giving all of it to the empire of God? Next week, we'll start with probably the greatest passage of literature ever written, in my opinion at least, the Sermon on the Mount. Thanks.